Have you been thinking about using Scrivener but have no idea where to start? Perhaps you've downloaded the free trial and opened it up and immediately felt overwhelmed. Or maybe you're just curious about the fuss some writers make about this program. If any of these situations apply to you, then this Scrivener tutorial is for you. When I first started using Scrivener, I found it overwhelming, but I persevered and learnt how to use the software. Since that fateful day, I haven't used another piece of software to write, revise, or edit my books, both fiction and non-fiction. Right now, I understand that using a new piece of software can be overwhelming. There is a learning curve, and it can be hard to tell if it's worth the time you need to invest. I want to point out that this software is worth the learning curve. Not all programs are, but this one is the exception. So how do you get started with Scrivener? Before we go over to my computer screen, I want to briefly talk about this new segment on my channel titled Tech Tutorials for Writers, and what you can expect from this series now and in the future. Like most content creators do at the end of a year, I looked back over my YouTube channel and I wasn't happy with the content I had shared. I'm a writer and an introvert. On top of that, I don't like being on camera. I tend to avoid it unless it's in a casual setting like a vlog where there is more B-roll footage than me. So my tendency is to avoid making videos. But I'm not the type of person to back down from a challenge. I feel that by giving into my introversion and dislike of the camera, I will never grow as an entrepreneur. This lack of growth is my worst nightmare. So this leads me to confess that I'm a bit of a nerd. I love tech. I've built my websites using WordPress and various themes over the years. Just a side note, I now have 4 websites, all built on WordPress. I've been blogging since about 2010 and experimenting with CSS, HTML, content creation, MailChimp, and the Divi theme. In more recent years, I've branched out into book funnel, sales and product funnels, Scrivener, and formatting software. And I've also been dabbling with Photoshop and Canva. However, I'm going to wait until my skills are more finely tuned before I share tutorials on Photoshop or Canva. I've been secretly sitting on all of this information for quite a while, but I've been wanting to create a piece of content that's exclusive to this channel. Thus, Tech Tutorials for Writers was born. The Tech for Writers tutorials will be posted on this channel at 6 p.m. London time or 1 p.m. Eastern time every Saturday. So come on over to my computer screen and let's get started with the how to get started with Scrivener tutorial. If you don't want to watch this tutorial in its entirety, I've included a list of timestamps with labels in the description box below. If you haven't purchased Scrivener or at least downloaded the 30-day trial product, you can do so with this website. I will add the website URL at the bottom of the screen as well as a clickable link in the description box below. Scrivener is available for Mac, Windows, and as an app for iOS. At the time of this recording, Scrivener 3 is only available for Mac, but according to the website, they plan to release Scrivener 3 for Windows in the future. If you do have a Windows computer, you can still use Scrivener 2, but I would like to point out that in this tutorial I'll be using the latest version of Scrivener, which is Mac only at the moment. You do require a Mac with iOS 10.12 or newer, and if you have a Windows computer you need Windows 7 or something great. You can totally tell by that statement that it's been forever since I've used a Windows computer. The app for iOS requires iOS 9 or above, which is quite good. So I think the latest release is like 11, so it's still used. Like if you have like an old iPhone 4 or 4S, you can still use the Scrivener app on iOS, but unfortunately it isn't actually available for Android. So if you don't have an Apple phone, you're totally missing out on this feature, and I love this feature actually. It's such a good feature to have because it syncs with the desktop computer and all of that. So the software retails for $45 US, and there are discounts for education, multiple purchase, and upgrades from an older version. Like the upgrade from Scrivener 2 to 3 is actually $25 at the moment. One of the unique features of the trial is it's for 30 days of use. It isn't like a regular trial where they give you a 30-day trial and that's it. This is 30 days of use. So if you use it every day, the trial will last 30 days. But if you only use it 3 times a week, that means the trial is going to last 10 weeks and you get 30 full days of use out of this product. So if you do have Scrivener 2, this is the information about what's different about Scrivener 3. Scrivener 3 just looks more, it looks prettier, and things are moved around, and they've consolidated a lot of things that in Scrivener 2 that you could do multiple things, and they really were the same thing, so they've just sort of consolidated that into one feature instead of being 3 features, for instance. I would like to point out that I'm not going to go through the initial software install and setup with you because I purchased Scrivener a while ago, and I purchased the new update the moment it was released. I've actually been using Scrivener since 2014, so it's been a while, and I do have Scrivener 3 because I'm about to show you. I actually didn't have the foresight to record this in advance. Now that I've said this out loud, it really sounds like a nerdy fail. Like, the second I downloaded the software, I did notice it was different, but I didn't think about whether I would use this as a record, so I didn't get to show you the download. But I will link a tutorial below by the creators of Scrivener who do walk you through this initial setup. I think they do have an earlier version of Scrivener in the video, now that I remember, but I think it's like the first version of Scrivener, but the download instructions haven't changed. By default, Scrivener opens at the project templates page if you close a project before exiting. Because it's the first time you've used Scrivener, you will need to choose a template from these options. In this tutorial, I will show you how to get started with Scrivener as a fiction writer. If you're writing non-fiction, you will need to choose a different template. So which template should you choose if you're writing fiction? I love to use the first template in the fiction tab that's labelled novel. If you click on the template, you will need to give your novel a name. At this point in time, you may not have a name for your work in progress, so just give it anything. So I'm just going to call this a test work in progress. So this name that you give your project will be added to the compiler as the title of your novel, but you can change it anytime. It isn't actually a big deal. I'll show you how to do this in the metadata section of this tutorial. My Scrivener projects are all saved in an apps folder in Dropbox because this is how Scrivener syncs with the iOS app. So I would normally save it in here. So this is where my stuff is saved, but I'm not going to save this here at the moment. As you can see, I've just got like millions of them in there. And I don't think I need one more, so I'm just going to save it in here because I'm just opening this just to show you how to use it. So I will show you how to sync Scrivener with the app in the syncing section of this tutorial. I've created a 3-act structure Scrivener template to make the setup easier for you. I realise this is super obvious, but this template is for fiction only. If you want me to do a tutorial for non-fiction writing, let me know in the description box below. I will upload the template to my Dropbox account and share it via email. If you want to use this template, you can sign up for it on this landing page. It's just ameliahay.com/Scrivener-template. Just a side note, if you do choose to sign up for this Scrivener file, you will only receive Scrivener-related emails every now and then, as well as tips on story structure. You will not receive blog updates or my writing tips newsletter unless you specifically sign up for those things. I just want to point out that I take the data I receive from people super seriously, and I only email people when I have permission to email them. If you don't want to use my template, this tutorial will walk you through how to set up and use Scrivener to write your novel, but the template that I do this in is this 3-act structure template. So if you love it and want it, that's totally fine. If you don't, I hope you find this tutorial useful. What you see on the screen is my 3-act structure template. I'm going to walk you through how to use the template and highlight the features Scrivener has to offer. This template is shown in the latest edition of Scrivener, which is the 3rd edition. The template should be compatible with either Scrivener 2 or 3, or even if you've got Scrivener 1. The tutorial will focus on the features that relate to outlining and story ideas first. After that, I will show you how to use the manuscript section in the binder. So all of this down here is the outlining and story idea sort of features, and up here, this little box, this little icon here is the manuscript where you actually do all the writing. In the binder section, the project is made up of folders and note documents. So this here, this is a folder and this is considered a note document, all with different icons. These particular icons, this is actually the default icon for the notes, but this isn't the default action for the folder. It's just something I've gone in and I've changed the icon. Yeah, so the great thing about Scrivener is you can customize it just as I have done here on the screen. Under the research icon, I've created a series of small flags, which are Scrivener note documents. To create these notes, click on the research folder, then click on the plus sign at the bottom of the page. So that's down here, and that's just to create a note. A new note will appear in the research folder. You'll probably notice it looks different to the other notes in the folder. This is because I changed the icon. I use the flags to represent different things. The code I like to use is as follows. You've probably noticed that I'm in a completely different Scrivener file, and you're right, this file is the project for my thriller novel Immunity. At the moment, the novel is currently in editing at the time of this recording. The light blue flags represent story ideas and development, the light green flags represent story research folders, and the red flags represents the scenes in Act 1. The scenes in the research section are 1 or 2 sentence synopsises or scene notes. They are not the scenes of the first draft or the final draft. They're just sort of synopsis and story outline type of notes that are in here. I write the first draft and make all revisions in the manuscript section. This red flag that says Act 1, this is where I write the first draft, and all of the scenes sit underneath that little flag. The purple flags represent Act 2 and the yellow flag represents Act 3, and once again these are just sort of synopsises, like 1 or 2 words, scene outlines. The orange flags represent editing notes. These aren't actually, you won't find this particular section in the 3-act structure template. That's because this is purely just revision and rewriting. The 3-act structure template is designed to use from your first draft before your first draft to obviously your final draft, but as you go through and revise or rewrite your work, you will develop your own system. I might include them at some stage. I've created my system for editing and recording notes in Scrivener. I use the split screens method system where I have notes at the bottom of the screen and the scene at the top. There's this little button here. And so usually I'll have the scene sitting up here, and I'll have the story, the editing notes here. So but this is the prologue editing notes, and as I go through and make the changes, I do a strike through. And I keep using, so I do several rounds of revisions, and I keep using the same notes for every round, and I've realised that it's nice to look back on the notes that I had before, so I'm not just going back and changing things backwards and forwards, that I'm actually going in the right direction. I'm not constantly redoing something. If you want me to share how I revise and edit my novels and show you how I do this in Scrivener, let me know in the comments section below, and I'll take you through the revision of a draft of another book. Maybe not Immunity because it's my first one, because I need to sort of figure out if the system works and look back and see what I need to change. And these white flags, I'll just collapse this. So this white flag represents the deleted scenes. I keep these in this folder because I don't want to trash them. In the future, I'm considering sharing these deleted scenes with my email list after the book has been published, or maybe even before the book is published, just to release as marketing to get people excited about my books. This key and formatting notes are written in the project notes folder. This feature was in the old version of Scrivener. There were a few different features in the old Scrivener that all performed very similar tasks. In the new version, they were all merged into one feature. Upon upgrade, all of the old features were added into the bookmarks section. Yeah, they were added as bookmarks in here. I love this bookmarks feature because these notes that are in here, they're general sort of, as you can see, they're general and editing notes. So as I go through each heavy edit, I have to answer certain questions, and I do this in a project notes folder so I can keep it for future reference. So I'm going to transition back to the 3-act structure template, and I'm going to show you how to create these project notes folders. I'm just going to change, this is actually in the corkboard view, so I'm just going to change it to just the document view. And these little lines here just separate each individual document. To create this, simply click the icon at the bottom of the page. Give the folder a name. So I'm just going to call this Add a Blank Notes Document by clicking the plus icon at the bottom of the page. If you want to bookmark these notes, click on the file and drag it towards the red icon in the toolbar. So if you want to add this as a bookmark, this is how it's done. And there it is. So if you want to change the icon of a folder or a notes document, all you have to do is right click or press Control click for Mac. And you've got all these options to change the icon to. So I think I want to change this to the filing cabinet because it makes more sense. So in that pop-up list, just select the icon. So with here, if I wanted to change this one, so right click, go down here to change icon, and then from this pop-up, this giant pop-up list, just select the icon you want to change it to. So with this particular one, because it's a notes folder, I'm just going to change this to a white notes folder. Now go back to the story section in the research section. So this here. When you expand these folders, you will see ideas, premise, story details, synopsis, and scene list. In this folder, I usually write a few brainstorming style notes when I'm in the idea phase of the writing process. And I usually label these notes as an idea. And if you see at the bottom of the right-hand side of the screen, it just says idea here. If you click on that, you can sort of change that. But I like to keep these as ideas, and I keep it as no status. If you click the tag icon at the top of the screen, so just right here, it actually says metadata. So in here, you will see an include in compile checkbox. And by checking the compile checkbox, the notes in this section will actually be included in the compile. But because this is sort of story idea, I don't actually want any of this stuff that's in the research folder, characters, places. I don't want these in the compile. The only thing I want in the compile is the documents that are underneath the manuscript section. So from characters on downwards, each of these folders and note sections have been unchecked. So these will be excluded from the compile, and they will also be excluded from your word count because you don't want all of this extra stuff distorting how many words you've written, and you certainly don't want them in the final product. So in the premise section, I write a brief description of my story idea. Underneath this is a note labeled story details, and in this section I write the type of story, notes on the type of story I want to write. So in this section I add notes about the type of novel, such as novel, novella, short story. I'll also include information about the genre, the word count, the Amazon categories, the log and the log line. A log line is a terminology I got from screenwriting. It's like a really basic one or two liner that describes the story that you're going to write. So in the synopsis section, I write a one-page synopsis of my story, and after this synopsis, I expand in the story and start creating a list of scenes. So these two particular note sections are used together. So I go from a synopsis, which is really, my synopsises generally look like this happens, then this happens, and this happens, and eventually it becomes a scene list of the most important scenes in the story, and then I sort of flesh it out from there. I added a separate story research folder because I do story research throughout the writing process. The first round of story research is done after the outlining phase. Over the years, I've found it easier to devote an entire note to a topic and add notes and links to URLs in the file. I don't do a lot of research at sort of the story creation process. I only do enough to start writing the story, and as I write the story, I add a task on Todoist. I'll show you that here because I do have it open. So I've got the desktop app, and I love it as much as the mobile app, to be honest, and this is sort of Todoist, so I'll add a note in here, just like all of these others, to do research at a later date. After adding this task, I make a decision at that particular moment, and usually I put an X and continue writing the first draft. Usually I'll put an X and then I'll highlight the text in like a turquoise colour, so it's quite bright, so it stands out. And so during the revision stage, I will make all of these changes based on the research that I've done. So I don't like to stop the first draft writing process for anything, but I will point out to you that I do write thrillers, and the way I would write a thriller would be different the way I would write a fantasy. If I am planning on doing a fantasy novel, so trilogy, maybe 5 books, maybe a trilogy at some point, and I'll be doing a ton of more research for that than I would do for a thriller novel like Immunity. With Immunity, I can almost sort of make it up as I go along, and well, I don't really make it up as I go along. I sort of know enough about the world to start writing, and as I have an idea about something, or I come up to something and go, oh, is this right? I will put a note into Todoist and I'll keep going. So the next rounds of research are performed during revision, and they're also added in this story research phase. So I'm just going to transition to the Immunity Scrivener file and show you what I mean. So on the screen you'll see my research notes for Immunity, and again, as you can see, I've created notes, each devoted to a topic. The last note document contains information about how a newspaper works, and I needed to get really clear on when the delivery deadline was, and just basically how the production of a newspaper works, because the journalists need to work to a deadline. So if they finish their story at some crazy sort of time in the morning, they're obviously not going to stop the presses for that. And I needed to figure out a lot of information about how this particular production side of a newspaper works. So I put links here, and I've since watched documentaries about, I think it was the New York Times. I watched the New York Times documentary, which is quite insightful. As I research things, I add notes and source links here. This is actually a really good habit to get into, to put the source link in, just so you know, if you go back and if you ever question yourself, where did I get this information? You can go back and double check the source, check if it's credible, maybe and sort of weigh up to see if you need to make a further change. But otherwise, you don't know where you've gotten the information from it, and at some point it can get quite confusing. I've since stopped using these notes and transitioned to creating a separate Scrivener Bible, because the James Lon series is a series, and it's an open-end series, so I'm going to keep writing it as long as people want to read it. And I've also realised the value in keeping all of the world building and the notes in one central place. So the books will be written in separate files, but the research and the character arcs and tracking a character's progress throughout the books, that will all be in the James Lond series Bible. So all of the notes for every book will be written in the series Bible, of course. And this is more of a consistency thing, because I don't want to, if you have all of your information everywhere and you're writing a series, it can be actually super difficult to keep track of it all, and you can make mistakes. And what happens is those readers who really love your books will send you emails or write it in the reviews and say, hey, you messed this up in this particular book, you said this and now you're saying this, just for the sake of consistency, so it's an enjoyable read for people. You can use this template for a book that's part of a series, trilogy, or even standalone. It doesn't particularly matter, but if you like to have all your information in one place, you might want to consider having a series Bible. So after I create the initial shorter scene outline, I create a full scene-by-scene outline in Excel. I then go back to the outline section and I add the scenes in Scrivener. You don't have to use Excel as I do. You can write a full outline in Scrivener, but the Excel spreadsheet is a habit that I created and I just love using Excel. I know that's, God, I'm such a nerd, but I really do love Excel. Not ashamed to admit it. I've created a playlist of all the episodes of the Indie Authorpreneur podcast about 3-act structure, so you can understand the terminology I use in this template. This 3-act structure is an ongoing series on the podcast, so each week I'll update this playlist with a new episode. I'll add a link to this playlist as a card on the top right-hand side of your screen and in the description box below. At the time of this recording, I've recorded an episode on 3-act structure in its entirety, and then I've gone and in a little deeper and I've looked at the hook, the ordinary world, inciting incidents, and this particular scene here. I've called this turning point 1, but in the podcast I returned it as the point of no return. Tri-fail cycles is obviously not just going to be one scene, it's going to be many scenes. Midpoint, turning point, so eventually I will do a podcast episode on each and every one of these little scenes, just to explain how to write, a great midpoint, for instance, or ordinary world scene. So I'll make sure that I definitely include that playlist, just so you can check it out. The character profile is a feature of Scrivener that I don't really use. Scrivener has character profile templates that you can use to create characters, but I like to use an ordinary note document and add an image and character notes. It's a great tool to use. The reason why I don't use this is I learned to write stories through screenwriting and before the days of Scrivener. So my first character profiles and story synopsises were created in Microsoft Word way back in 2011. So don't let me and my bad habits stop you from using this feature. To create a character profile, click on the character. I've just realised I got this in the corkboard section, so so this is what the character sketch looks like. So to create another one of these character profiles, just make sure you've got characters highlighted, and then hit the plus icon at the bottom of the screen. This plus icon will create another document of whatever you've got highlighted. So if you have a regular notes document highlighted, it'll create a regular notes one. It'll create a regular character sketch if you've got characters highlighted. The same with places as well. Actually, now that I've had a chance to think about it, I have actually used these sketches in a way, not in a huge way, but if we go back to my Immunity Scrivener file, you'll see that I've just labelled them with the characters' names, and occasionally I'll add in a photo. I know this appears to be a never-ending list of characters, but some of these people are deceased and are just purely mentioned, and some don't even make it to the end of the novel. So, because I've got quite a high body count, and I like to name every character that I've got in my book, whether it's just a mention, whatever. So I'm writing a thriller novel set in the world of journalism, so this explains the huge cast. Like, I've got names of sort of very minor characters that sort of may get more of a platform as the series progresses. So I've got options with characters. This is sort of why there's so many. This guy is actually actor. He plays Gaius in the BBC TV series Merlin. So that's just, I've just taken this particular actor as inspiration for how this particular character Jerry Lane looks. So to get the image in here, you literally just drag it in from your desktop. So you just drag it from your desktop straight into your the Scrivener file, and it just sits there. So the next section you'll notice is places. And the places section is where you put details about setting and locations of your novel. This is another feature of Scrivener that I don't use. I've opted to place dropped pins on a Google map and save them as a list in my account online. My husband works for Google and he's done a great job at encouraging me to use all of the Google tools. So to create a settings sketch, it's the same thing. You hit that plus icon at the bottom of the screen and a places sketch will magically appear under places. Not by magic, but yeah. It actually looks super similar to the character sketch in the previous section. You can also drag images. If you go back to this notes, you can drag an image here. So it's got the little image icon. So you can drag a little image of the setting. This would actually be great if you're writing maybe sci-fi or fantasy and you need to describe places that you particularly wouldn't see on an everyday basis. Now that I've looked at this in greater detail, I'm probably going to start using them more often because they are actually quite good. They're probably, with my thriller novels, because I use real places, I think maybe that's where the Google Maps thing does come in handy. But if I was writing fantasy, I would probably definitely use this. This is super helpful. This section is where all of the scenes in your first draft will live. The manuscripts folder will show you all of the documents you've ticked to. So if you've ticked something to include it in the compile, it will actually list it in here. So I noticed that when I looked at the word count in immunity down here, actually it's not immunity, it's something else. I'll show you. If we go to Smarter Goal Setting, which is a non-fiction book that I've written in Scrivener, you will see that this manuscript file includes everything, including the copyright and all of this down below. So this book is actually, I'm in the process of creating a second edition for this book, which is why you're seeing the red, like it's not complete. So all of these things, because I've ticked include in, actually, sorry, the manuscript section will include everything that's under this manuscript folder. So whether you tick to include it in the compile or not is completely irrelevant. It will show you everything in here as you scroll down. So that's one particular view, or you can go to the individual folders and look at the contents. So really, it creates an electronic manuscript that you can just sort of read through. When I first learned story structure, I was learning how to write a screenplay. For those of you who are unfamiliar with how a screenplay is created, a screenplay is written in scenes. So when I first started writing novels, I struggled with chapters because all I understood were scenes. And I remember with one of the first books that I wrote, for some crazy reason, I tried to pants it. So I was like, maybe I'll just write by chapters because that's how people talk. And I got really confused as to what was a chapter. Is this technically? And then after a while, I just sort of thought, scrap this. I'm just going to write in scenes because that's what makes most sense to me. So yeah, it took me far too long to figure out that scenes were strung together and put into chapters, and that's what the lines were in novels. Every time you see a blank line in a novel, it's actually a scene break. So you're transitioning to a new scene. So that's how they show that in a novel. But I'll talk more about scenes and chapters in another video at a later time. As you can see on the screen, I have 3 chapters labelled Act 1, Act 2 and Act 3. These chapters are folders that contain scenes. Each folder has scenes for the entire act. So at the moment, because this is the 3-act structure template and you haven't used it, it'll just have scene, scene, scene. Each scene is a document similar to the notes documents. So it really is just a notes. And as you can see here, it's got including compile, and it's got section type that it's just a scene. So if you want to create a new scene in Act 1, just click on this plus icon at the bottom of the screen, and a new scene will appear in the folder, just like Word or any other type of word processor. All you need to do is click in the white space and just start typing away. Just a quick word about formatting. Don't worry about the correct formatting in this stage. All you need to do is write or rewrite, and when you need to submit it to an editor, you then format your novel in the compile section. The compile section is super easy to use. All you have to do is click the formatting options and press compile. It's a tiny bit more complicated than that, but that's the general gist. I'll do a compile tutorial when I've finished editing Immunity, because the compile for a fiction novel a little bit more complicated than the compile for non-fiction. Or maybe it's the other way around. Yeah, the compile in Scrivener 3 is more difficult for non-fiction and it's easier for fiction. So if you want to give your scene a title, all you need to do is double click this and the space will open up for you to write in the scene name. So now we're back in the Immunity Scrivener file. I want to show you what the binder looks like after the first draft is complete and the revisions are underway. So just ignore the color coding and the icons for now. So this is what it looks like. I've got all of the, this one that I've labeled prologue. I might not actually call it a prologue because it's actually important. I don't want readers to skip over it, so I think I'm just going to label this chapter 1. That's just a side note. So this is sort of what it looks like. I do write in shorter scenes. For me, because this is a thriller, it's sort of fast paced, so they do move through scenes quite quickly, or quicker than say another type of genre like romance. So this is sort of what Act 1 looks like. Act 2 is really similar, and that's how they appear at the moment. So I'm going to go back to the 3-act structure template. So on the right hand side of the screen, you'll see this white box and it's labelled Synopsis. So I leave this blank for the editing phase. The reason for this is it's easy for me to write a 2-line scene synopsis during one of my revision stages, then check to see if the scene has lived up to this expectation. But if you don't have to use it in this way, you can just write your synopsis in here to help you as you write. That's the beauty of Scrivener. You can use it whatever way you want to, but I'm just showing you how I particularly use it, just to show you around the program, just to give you ideas on how to use it. In this little notes section, I like to write notes about future revisions or editing changes. The reason behind this is when I write the first draft, all I want to do is get the words on the page. I don't trust myself to write a first draft and edit at the same time. I'm worried that if I attempt this, that I'll never get the story finished. So I add changes here. Usually I'll be writing another scene and I'll come back. Usually I'm writing, say, this scene, and I'll get an idea, or I'll realize that I need to make a minor change, story change, or I need to add a new scene. So I'll also write these notes in here. Sometimes these changes will result in edits to previously written scenes. I make a note here and I go on and write as if the change has already happened. So I act as if, yep, that change is done, and I move forward. At the bottom of the screen down here, you'll notice 2 labels. This first label here is really to classify the file type, and this is actually super important to the compile, so I really wouldn't recommend you creating your own labels here. Feel free to create your labels with status section, but not with this file type section. Yeah, so obviously this is labeled, this is labeled scene, and if you go over to this Act 1 folder, it's labeled chapter and it's got no status. So this, as I said earlier, this label, this really should say to do. So this second label is for you to know where you're at with the writing. This feature comes in handy during revision, and in Immunity, I'm just going to show you Immunity for a second. With prologue, I've added like 9 heavy edits in there, so I know where that particular scene is at. I've realised I need to go back to Immunity again because this is something I've used in Immunity. So over here you'll get snapshots, this little camera. I like to use this particular feature during revision. I save a version of each scene before I make a round of revisions. My heavy edit has about 9 rounds of revisions in it. It does sound like a lot, but each round focuses on one element of the story. Before I go through make any revisions, I save the snapshot of the previous version, then I go back and make changes. So if, as you can see, like I've started with a tall, thin man in his late 50s, and I've started with it completely. I've added another sentence in front. So this is how I use snapshots. So to create another snapshot, you just hit this plus button. So you just give it a label. So you create that and it creates a snapshot. So then you can go through. This is what it looks like. This is really the first version of this. And this is the second heavy edit. This is the second heavy edit. As I alluded to earlier, I like to write in scenes and group the scenes in acts. I originally grouped the scenes into chapters. Like, I tried to figure this out before I was finished with my revisions, but the file you have after your first draft will look completely different to, say, your third or fourth draft. It's much easier to move scenes around when it's formatted like, so you group the scenes according to the act. Because originally I had like 80 chapters to these 3 acts because I was changing stuff around so frequently. So I have about 120 something scenes and 80 chapters at the end of the first round of the heavy edit in Immunity, and I realised that was the biggest mistake I made. I needed to group the scenes according to act, and that spent me hours reformatting that, moving it around. Maybe not hours, maybe it took an hour. So what is metadata? Metadata is the data relating to your novel. This includes title, author name, publisher, and copyright year. If you need to change or create any of these details, you can find it in the compile section. To find the compile feature, click the box with the up arrow icon in the toolbar. So it's this little icon right here. And if you select, so all you have to do is select one of these compile for options. Like, your options are not endless, but they're sort of endless. So I've selected EPUB. So to access this metadata, you have to click this little tag icon here and add the title. So this is the title of this is Immunity, a James Lalonde thriller novel. And the abbreviated title is just Immunity. I've added in my author name, forename, and then I write my publisher name here, all rights reserved, publication date, the copyright date. Really, I started writing this in 2014, but I keep updating this every year. To save changes you make, just hold down the Alt key or Option and just press save. And that's how you save something in the compile, because without that you just have the compile button and that's it. So every time you come back to the compile section, these settings will be the same unless you go back and change them. So if we go back and have a look, that it still says 2014. So before you start writing your novel, I recommend taking advantage of the word count tracking features that Scrivener has to offer. To access the word count features, in the top toolbar, click on the projects. Click on the projects, and if you scroll down and then select project targets. So the pop-up box contains 2 bars that will show you the writing progress. If you hover over the manuscript target, you will notice the word count target is editable. So you can add, so I've preset this to 100 because that's usually how long my first drafts are. So enter your manuscript word count here. To set further goals, click on the options button to be taken to the settings screen. So this little options here. So in the draft target tab, choose the deadline for your first draft. So I've put here, just for the sake of this tutorial, I've put the 12th of April 2018. After you've put in the date, go to the session target tab. In this tab, check the box next to automatically calculate from draft deadline. So you just have to select that here, and then from here, select the days that you can write. So I've just chosen 3 because not everyone writes every day of the week, and that's perfectly fine. And I've just selected 3 random dates. So underneath these days, check the boxes that says allow writing on the day of the deadline. So I've done that. And then check the show target notifications, and then hit OK. For some reason, the show Twitter icon is shown by default below, but oh well. And then it will show you in the next window, it will tell you how many words you need to write in each session to finish the draft on the day of the deadline. So if you don't write at all on your writing days, it'll recalculate how many words you need to write for a day until you're forced to either change the deadline or get some serious writing done. In this final section in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to sync the desktop version with the app of your iPhone. First, you'll need to purchase the Scrivener for iPhone app, and that will be scroll. So you can purchase that from the App Store. So first, purchase the Scrivener app for your iPhone and download it onto your iPhone and sign up, and then sign up for a free Dropbox account, and then add Dropbox to your desktop as well as your phone. So this is the Dropbox folder on my desktop. So Dropbox will add this automatically, and you'll just choose where you want it to go. So before you do anything, you need to close Scrivener. I haven't done this because I'm naughty. So whenever you press, I just pressed the Apple button and then Q for quit, and every time you do that, it will save it automatically, and then it will also back it up. So after Dropbox has finished syncing to your desktop, and how you can tell that it's done that is everything green has been synced and anything blue needs to be synced. So we now know that Dropbox has finished syncing. So then all you have to do is move the file. So I like to save my stuff in Apps, Scrivener, and keep all of the documents in Scrivener. So say if I wanted this test WIP in Scrivener, I would literally just move it in there like that and it would appear. Actually, I'm going to do that. See, and now it's blue, so it's syncing something, and here's the test WIP, and then it's already in there. So after Dropbox has finished syncing with the cloud, double click on the file you've just moved and open it. So I'm just going to double click. And this is that blank document we created at the start of the tutorial. So I'm just going to close this, and then I'm going to go over to my iPhone and I'm going to show you how to use the iPhone version. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is my iPhone, basically. So, and we're actually in the App Store. So just search for Dropbox. Showing me Google. That's an ad. So this is Dropbox, but I've already got it on my phone, so we don't need to do that. And I've saved this in this file, and this is the French. This is French for writing. This is Dropbox. So basically Dropbox is free. It's a free app. You just need to sign up as you've done in the previous step for the account. So this is just what it looks like on the iPhone. Before you actually opened it like I have, I would just double check that the Dropbox folder on your desktop has finished syncing. And obviously when there is the sync is complete, as I've shown you in the previous clip, there will be a green tick next to the file. You will need to do this to avoid conflicts between the desktop and the iOS app. The next step is to open the Scrivener app and click the sync icon at the top of the screen. So this app here with the S next to Dropbox is what Scrivener will look like. So you just click on open it here, and because I've used this before, it'll go sync now. It'll ask me to sync, so I'll sync it now. So it'll connect, it's like connecting with my Dropbox. But if you're using this for the first time, it obviously won't know where anything is. It'll just assume you're using it from the app by itself. So you'll need to, when you check the sync icon, what it will do is it will ask you to select an option. So you'll need to choose the option to link Scrivener to Dropbox. And because Dropbox is already installed on your iPhone, it will open automatically, especially if you've already logged into Dropbox. So then you would choose the folder where your Scrivener files are located, and then you press done and wait for the file to upload. And at the moment it's downloading the file list and it's taking forever because my internet is super slow. But I am recording this at 7 p.m. at night, so it will take a while, especially if you have a million Scrivener files like I do. It'll take you a while to load for it to sync every time. So make sure that when you do sync, that you've saved and closed the desktop file, because if you don't do that, that's when it'll create conflicts with whatever version you've got open. And what will happen is you'll get a file at the bottom of your Scrivener folder, and it'll say conflicts, and you've got to go choose which version you want, and it's a bit painful. But if you make sure that you only have one opened at a time, because they both use Dropbox, it'll be perfectly fine. Yes, every time you open it, make sure you select the sync now. But yeah, so this is the 3-act structure template. So I can show it to you on the desktop. So this is where we were. It's even got the changes I made to project notes. You can see project notes here. And this is all the research. So it's completely synced with both versions. So sorry, the iPhone version is synced with the desktop version. If you do have any questions about what I've just shown you, feel free to ask them in the comments section. And if I get enough questions, maybe I'll do really short videos just for specific issues or problems. As always, I have an important question to ask you. Is there a writing or publishing related tech tutorial that you would like me to do on this channel? I want to hear from you. Let me know by sharing your ideas in the comments section below. Next week, I'll walk you through the exact steps you need to take to create a series Bible using Scrivener. If you like this video, then give it a thumbs up. And if you're new to this channel and want to be notified about more videos just like this, then hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next Saturday for another tech tutorial.